The scent of pine and frost clung to the evening air as I made my way through the dense forest. Twigs snapped beneath my boots, each crack seemingly amplified in the eerie silence that had settled over the woods. The autumn moon hung low and swollen, casting silver shadows through the canopy above. The kind of moon that made the elders in our village bolt their doors and whisper warnings about the creatures that prowled on such nights. Tonight was the hunt. Everyone knew to stay indoors, to draw their curtains, and pretend not to hear the distant howls that echoed from the mountains. But I couldn't stay locked away, not after what I'd heard at the village council meeting earlier that day. They had agreed, those self-important men with their weathered faces and cold eyes, that the annual tribute to the wolf packs would include an offering of land this year. My grandmother's land, the only home I'd ever known. The packs must be appeased, Mayor Thornton had declared, his voice dripping with false regret as his eyes refused to meet mine. Miss Ellis, your grandmother's property sits directly at the border of the territories. It's the most logical choice. Logical. As if logic had anything to do with the fact that a woman living alone after her grandmother's death made for an easy target. I was invisible to them, just a blonde-haired nobody who kept to herself, who spent her days mixing herbs and tinctures as her grandmother had taught her. Too odd to marry, too quiet to defend herself against their decisions, my fingers instinctively reached for the small silver pendant hanging at my throat, a wolf with a tiny emerald eye, the last gift my grandmother had pressed into my palm before she died. Our family has always understood the balance, Alara, she'd whispered, her once strong voice fading. Never forget that in nature, it's not always the strong who survive, but those wise enough to adapt. The pendant seemed to warm against my skin, as a chorus of howls suddenly erupted from the north, closer than before. I froze, pressing myself against the rough bark of an ancient pine. The hunt was moving in my direction. Common sense screamed for me to turn back, to return to my soon-to-be-lost cottage and accept defeat as I always had. Instead, I pushed forward, drawn by something I couldn't name. Defiance, perhaps, or simple desperation. If I was to lose everything, I wanted to at least witness these creatures that held so much power over our lives. The terrain grew rockier as I approached the ridge that marked the boundary between our village lands and what the elders called the wild territory. No one ventured here, not even the most experienced hunters. It was forbidden, not by human law, but by something older, an unwritten agreement that had kept an uneasy peace for generations. A sharp yelp cut through the silence, not the powerful howl of a hunter, but the frightened cry of something small and vulnerable. I hesitated only briefly before scrambling up the rocky incline toward the sound. In a small clearing just over the ridge, moonlight illuminated a scene that made my heart stutter. A tiny wolf pup, its fur silver gray in the moonlight, was backed against a fallen log. Blood matted the fur on its right flank, and it bared miniature fangs at me in terrified defiance. But it wasn't the injured pup that made my breath catch. It was the large metal trap clamped around its small hind leg, the cruel teeth of it biting deep into flesh. "Poachers," I whispered, rage flooding through me. The traps had been outlawed decades ago, both for their cruelty and for the fury they provoked from the packs. Someone had deliberately set this trap in pack territory, a provocation that could shatter our fragile peace. The pup growled weakly as I approached, its eyes, startlingly intelligent, watching my every move. "I won't hurt you," I murmured, slowly lowering myself to the ground a few feet away. "I'm not with them." Another chorus of howls rose in the distance, and the pup's ears perked up, its cries becoming more urgent, calling for help. I glanced nervously over my shoulder. If the pack found me here, beside an injured pup caught in a human trap, they wouldn't stop to ask questions. My grandmother's pendant seemed to pulse against my skin. In nature, it's not always the strong who survive, but those wise enough to adapt. With a deep breath, I reached into my satchel and retrieved a small vial of valerian extract, a mild sedative I'd prepared for Mrs. Peterson's insomnia. "This will help with the pain," I whispered, inching forward. The pup snapped weakly at my fingers, but I could see the fight draining from its small body. Carefully, I dropped a few drops of the extract onto a piece of dried meat I'd brought as a snack and offered it to the trembling creature. After a suspicious sniff, Hunger won out, and it devoured the morsel. While I waited for the sedative to take effect, I examined the trap. It was old but well maintained, its mechanism simple enough if you knew what to look for. My grandmother had shown me once, explaining that knowledge of such things could save lives, though I doubted she had ever imagined this scenario. When the pup's eyes grew heavy and its growls subsided into soft whimpers, I moved quickly. The trap fought me, its rusted spring nearly impossible to compress, but desperation lent me strength. With a final push, the jaws released, and I gently extracted the small leg. The wound was deep but clean. Working swiftly, I cleaned it with water from my flask, applied a poultice of yarrow and comfrey, and wrapped it in a strip torn from my petticoat. Throughout my ministrations, the pup watched me with those unnervingly aware eyes, no longer frightened but assessing. "You should be able to walk on this in a few days," I told the pup, feeling slightly foolish for speaking to it as though it could understand. "But you need to rest now," and a bone-chilling howl cut through the night. So close it seemed to vibrate the very air around us. This was no distant call. This was a battle cry. The pup's ears pricked up, and despite its injury, it attempted to stand. A low, mournful whine escaped its throat, a sound so filled with longing it made my chest ache. "Is that your family?" I whispered, gathering my supplies with trembling hands. "They're coming for you. I need to go." But as I turned to flee, the pup caught the edge of my skirt between its teeth, tugging weakly. When I looked down, those intelligent eyes locked with mine, and for a moment, something passed between us, an understanding that transcended the boundaries of species. With a muttered curse at my own foolishness, I scooped the pup into my arms. "Fine. But if they tear me apart for touching you, I'll be very disappointed." The pup nuzzled into my neck, its small body shivering against mine as I picked my way back down the ridge. The howls were converging now, the hunt clearly tracking the missing member of their pack. I needed to put as much distance between us as possible. I ran through the forest, the pup clutched to my chest, branches whipping at my face and tearing at my hair. My cottage appeared through the trees, a small sanctuary with its stone walls and thatched roof. Inside, I gently placed the pup on my bed, checking that the bandage had held during our flight. "You can stay until morning," I told it firmly, though the way it curled immediately into my pillow suggested it had already made itself at home. "Then we'll figure out how to get you back to your pack without getting me killed." As I stoked the fire and prepared a small bowl of water for the pup, a strange calm settled over me. I should have been terrified. I had interfered in pack business, taken a wolf pup, violated the boundary. By all rights, I should be preparing for retribution, not sitting beside my hearth with an injured wolf pup watching me with those eerily knowing eyes. Yet the pendant at my throat remained warm, almost comforting. Our family has always understood the balance. Perhaps this was what my grandmother had meant, finding courage in the small acts of compassion that maintained the harmony between our worlds. I fell asleep in my chair by the fire, one hand resting on the pup's soft fur. My dreams were vivid and strange, running through moonlit forests on 4 legs, the earth rich with scents I couldn't name, a deep sense of belonging pulsing through me with each heartbeat, and watching over it all, a pair of eyes the color of amber, ancient and powerful, seeing through to my very soul. Dawn broke with a pounding on my door that jolted me from sleep. The pup was alert instantly, ears forward, a low growl rumbling from its chest despite its injury. "Miss Ellis, open this door immediately," Mayor Thornton's voice, unusually high with panic. With a whispered command for the pup to stay, I smoothed my rumpled dress and hair before opening the door just wide enough to peer out. The sight that greeted me stole the breath from my lungs. Mayor Thornton stood on my doorstep, his face ashen, flanked by 2 members of the village council. But it wasn't their presence that sent ice flooding through my veins, it was the man standing behind them. He towered over the councilman, his broad shoulders and powerful frame making them appear childlike in comparison. Dressed in dark clothing that clung to his muscular form, he radiated a predatory stillness that made the hair on the back of my neck rise. But it was his eyes that held me transfixed. Amber gold, exactly like those from my dreams. Ancient and knowing and filled with barely contained fury. "Miss Ellis," Mayor Thornton's voice quavered, May I present Alaric Blackwood, Alpha King of the Northern Territories. The man, the Alpha, stepped forward, those golden eyes never leaving mine. You have something that belongs to me, he said, his voice deep and resonant, sending an involuntary shiver down my spine. And I've come to claim it. Behind me, as if on cue, the wolf pup let out a soft whimper. The Alpha's gaze sharpened, and I knew with absolute certainty that my life was about to change forever. For a moment that stretched into eternity, no one moved. The Alpha's golden gaze had locked onto something behind me, and the intensity in those eyes made my breath catch. Without looking, I knew the pup had crept to the door, drawn by the familiar scent of its kind. "Step aside," the Alpha commanded, his voice deceptively soft but carrying an unmistakable edge of authority that made Mayor Thornton and the councilman shrink back. I should have obeyed instantly. Every instinct screamed at me to bow my head, to submit to the predator before me. Instead, I found myself tightening my grip on the doorframe, my voice steadier than I felt when I replied. I found him injured in a poacher's trap. His wound needs time to heal. A muscle twitched in the Alpha's jaw, the only indication that my defiance had registered. "A poacher's trap," he repeated, his voice dangerously calm. "On packlands." "Yes." I swallowed hard but held his gaze. I cleaned the wound and applied a poultice. The bleeding has stopped, but he shouldn't walk on it yet. The Alpha's nostrils flared slightly, and I realized with a jolt that he was scenting the air, catching the herbal aroma of my medicines, the metallic tang of the pup's blood, and beneath it all, my own fear-laced scent. "You're the herb woman," he stated rather than asked, "the one they call witch behind closed doors." Heat rushed to my cheeks, so even the creatures of the forest knew of my village's whispers. "I'm a healer," I corrected, lifting my chin. "As was my grandmother before me." Something shifted in his expression. A flicker of recognition, perhaps, or simple curiosity. Before he could respond, the pup pushed past my skirts and limped forward, its bandaged leg held carefully above the ground. A soft whine escaped its throat as it approached the Alpha, its small tail wagging hesitantly. The transformation in the Alpha was immediate and startling. The hardness in his face softened as he crouched down, one large hand extended toward the pup. "Rurik," he murmured, the name flowing from his lips like a prayer of thanksgiving. The pup, Rurik, pressed his small head against the Alpha's palm, a series of yips and whines emerging in what seemed like an explanation. The Alpha listened intently, his expression growing darker with each moment, until he finally straightened, the pup gathered carefully in his arms. "The council will return to the village," he commanded, not bothering to look at the trembling men behind him. "I have matters to discuss with Miss Ellis. Alone." Mayor Thornton opened his mouth as if to protest, then thought better of it. With a quick, jerky bow, he motioned for the councilmen to follow him. They retreated down the path with undisguised relief, throwing nervous glances over their shoulders until they disappeared among the trees. And then I was alone with the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, the most feared predator in our region, standing on my doorstep with an injured pup in his arms and thunder in his eyes. "May I come in?" he asked, his formal tone somehow more unnerving than outright demands would have been. I stepped back wordlessly, allowing him to enter my small cottage. The space seemed to shrink around his powerful presence, the ceiling suddenly too low, the walls too close. He moved with predatory grace to the chair I had slept in, settling the pup on the hearthrug before it. "You removed a trap from Packlands," he stated, those amber eyes assessing me as I hovered uncertainly by my kitchen table. "You tended a royal wolf pup's wounds. You brought him to your home." Each statement fell like a judgment, measured and precise. "Do you understand what you've done?" I swallowed hard. "I helped an injured creature. I didn't know he was royal." The Alpha's lips curved in what might have been amusement or derision. "Rurik is my brother's son, the next Alpha after me, should I fail to produce an heir." The implications of his words crashed over me in waves. I hadn't just interfered with pack business. I had handled the wolf equivalent of a crown prince. My grandmother's pendant suddenly felt heavy against my skin. "The trap," the Alpha continued, his voice hardening. Tell me exactly where you found it." I described the location as precisely as I could, watching as his expression grew increasingly thunderous. When I mentioned the ridge that bordered our territories, he rose to his feet in a single fluid motion that sent me stumbling backward. "That land is meant to be neutral ground," he growled, pacing the small confines of my cottage like a caged beast, protected by ancient agreements. "Not anymore," I said before I could stop myself. "The council voted yesterday to offer it as tribute to the Pax, my grandmother's land. This cottage is to be surrendered at the next full moon." He stopped abruptly, his gaze pinning me in place. "Your land?" I nodded, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "They claim it's a logical choice, being at the border. The truth is, I have no husband or father to speak for me at council. No one to fight for what's mine, and yet," he said softly, his eyes never leaving my face, "you fought for Rurik." Something passed between us then, an unspoken recognition that made the air feel suddenly charged. The pup whined softly from his place by the hearth, breaking the tension. The alpha, Alaric, moved to kneel beside him, examining the bandage on his leg with surprising gentleness. "Your work?" he asked, glancing up at me. I nodded, drawn forward despite myself. "Yarrow for the bleeding, comfrey to speed healing. The valerian was just to ease the pain while I worked." "Impressive," he murmured, and the simple word sent an unexpected warmth through my chest. How long had it been since anyone had appreciated my skills, rather than merely tolerating them? "He needs to rest," I said, kneeling opposite Alaric. The wound was deep. Walking too soon could reopen it. Rurik licked my hand as if in agreement, then turned his intelligent gaze to Alaric, another series of soft whines and yips emerging. "He says you saved him," Alaric translated, his voice oddly gentle, "that you spoke to him with respect and carried him through the darkness when he couldn't walk." I blushed, unsure how to respond to the fact that the alpha could apparently communicate with the pup in some way I couldn't comprehend. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Alaric said firmly. "They wouldn't. Most humans would have left him to die, or worse, finished what the trap began." His amber eyes studied me with renewed interest. "You're not like most humans, are you, Ellis?" "Alara," I corrected automatically. "My name is Alara." "Alara," he repeated, the name sounding different in his deep voice, almost lyrical. "It means bright light in the old tongue." Before I could respond, a howl rose from the forest, answered immediately by another. Alaric's head turned toward the sound, his entire body tensing. "My guards," he explained, rising to his feet. "They're reporting movement near the ridge, where you found the trap." Fresh fear crawled up my spine. "Poachers?" His expression darkened. "Perhaps, or something worse." He lifted Rurik carefully, cradling the pup against his chest. I must return to my people. Disappointment flooded through me, surprising in its intensity. I busied myself gathering a small packet of herbs, avoiding his gaze as I explained. "For the wound. Mix it with water into a paste and apply it twice daily." Alaric accepted the packet with a nod. At the door, he paused, turning back to fix me with that unnerving amber stare. "The matter of your land, and the council's decision, is not finished, Alara Ellis. I will return tomorrow." With that cryptic promise, he stepped into the morning light and disappeared into the forest, leaving me standing in my doorway, with the strange sensation that my life had irreversibly changed course. The day passed in a fog of confusion and anticipation. I went through the motions of my normal routine, gathering herbs from my garden, preparing tinctures for the villagers who still sought my remedies despite their whispers. But my thoughts kept returning to Alaric Blackwood, to those amber eyes that seemed to see through my carefully constructed walls, to the gentle way he had handled Rurik, despite his fearsome reputation. As twilight fell, a knock at my door sent my heart racing. But instead of the imposing Alpha, I found myself facing Mrs. Peterson, her weathered face pinched with anxiety. "The council's called an emergency meeting," she whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "They say the Alpha King has demanded every able-bodied man join a search at dawn. Something about traps and poachers." She clutched my arm with bony fingers. "There are strangers in the village, Alara. men with cold eyes and weapons hidden beneath their cloaks. I thanked her for the warning, my mind racing. Strangers with weapons, poachers most likely, come to check their traps, the same people who had nearly killed Rurik. Sleep eluded me that night. I sat by my window, watching the forest where occasionally I could see shadowy forms moving between the trees, wolves patrolling, guarding their territory against the threat that had injured one of their own. I clutched my grandmother's pendant, drawing comfort from its familiar weight. "What have I gotten myself into, grandmother?" I whispered to the empty room. "What would you have done?" The pendant warmed against my palm, as if in answer. I closed my eyes, remembering the stories my grandmother had told me. Tales of a time when humans and wolves had lived in harmony, when healers like us had served both communities. Tales I had always assumed were merely fantasies designed to comfort a lonely child. A sharp crack from outside jolted me from my reverie. I peered through the darkness, barely making out a figure moving along the edge of my garden, too small to be Alaric, too furtive to be a villager with honest business. Fear spiked through me, but curiosity won out. Grabbing a heavy iron poker from beside the hearth, I crept to my back door and eased it open. The intruder was crouched beside my herb garden, digging through the plants with quick, careless movements that made my gardener's heart ache. As I watched, he uprooted a precious nightshade plant, stuffing it into a sack at his side. "Those are poisonous if you don't know how to use them," I called out, brandishing my poker. "And they're mine." The man whirled, and moonlight caught the gleam of a blade in his hand. His face was unfamiliar, hard-edged and scarred across one cheek. "The witch," he spat, his accent marking him as an outsider. "Should have known this was your doing." "My doing?" I repeated, grip tightening on my makeshift weapon. The Alpha and his mutts, crawling all over these woods. He advanced slowly, knife held low and ready, checking every trap, hunting my men. All because one little runt got caught. Understanding dawned, cold and clear. "You're the poacher, the one who set the trap that caught Rurik." His eyes narrowed at the name. "So you know the beast. Figures. They say the old witch who lived here ran with wolves. Looks like her blood runs true." He lunged suddenly, the blade slicing air where I had stood a moment before. I swung the poker wildly, catching his shoulder hard enough to make him curse. But he was stronger, faster, and the next moment the poker was wrenched from my grip, clattering uselessly into the darkness. I backed away, heart hammering against my ribs. "The Alpha knows about the traps," I said, playing for time. "He's coming back tomorrow." The poacher's lip curled into a sneer. "Tomorrow will be too late for you, witch, and when they find your body, they'll blame the wolves. The truce will break, and hunting season will open on those precious packs." He raised the knife, and I braced myself to run, to fight, to do whatever I could to survive. But before either of us could move, a low, menacing growl cut through the night air. The poacher froze, his face draining of color as his gaze fixed on something behind me. "Impossible," he whispered. "They never come this close to human dwellings." Slowly, I turned my head. Standing at the edge of the garden, his massive form silver-limbed in the moonlight, was the largest wolf I had ever seen. Amber eyes glowed in the darkness, fixed with lethal intent on the poacher. Alaric had returned after all. Time seemed to suspend itself as Alaric's massive wolf form stood motionless, his amber gaze fixed on the poacher with deadly focus. In the moonlight, his fur gleamed silver and black, rippling over muscles coiled and ready to spring. His size was staggering, at least twice that of a normal wolf, his shoulders reaching nearly to my waist. The poacher's knife trembled in his grip. "Black Alpha," he whispered, the terror in his voice palpable. "They said the stories were just myths." I remained perfectly still, caught between predator and prey, the night air electric with tension. When Alaric took a single step forward, a rumbling growl vibrating from deep in his chest, the poacher broke. He turned and fled, crashing through the underbrush with the desperate panic of hunted game. Alaric's muscles bunched, preparing to give chase, but a soft cry escaped my lips before I could stop it. His head swiveled toward me, those intelligent amber eyes assessing me with unsettling awareness. For a breathless moment, I wondered if he would see me as prey as well, if the beast before me retained any of the man I had spoken with that morning. Slowly, carefully, I sank to my knees in the damp earth, making myself smaller. "Thank you," I whispered, the words emerging shaky and thin. The great wolf approached with fluid grace, each step deliberate. My heart hammered against my ribs, instinct warring with something deeper as he came close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his massive body. He lowered his head, and I closed my eyes, unsure what to expect. A warm, rough tongue licked my cheek, startling my eyes open. Alaric's wolf face was inches from mine, those amber eyes now holding a gentleness that seemed impossible in such a fearsome creature. I reached out a trembling hand, hesitating just before touching his fur. "May I?" I asked softly. He nudged his head against my palm in clear permission. The fur beneath my fingers was thick and surprisingly soft, warming my chilled skin. Something inside me settled at the contact, a sense of rightness that I couldn't explain. "He would have killed me," I said quietly, my fingers still buried in his fur. "To start a war between humans and wolves." Alaric's growl was softer this time, but no less emphatic. He pulled back, regarding me intently before stepping away. With one last meaningful look, he melted into the shadows of the forest, leaving me alone in my trampled garden with the poacher's discarded sack of stolen herbs. I didn't expect to sleep after such an encounter, but exhaustion claimed me shortly after I barred my doors and collapsed into bed. My dreams were vivid and strange, running through moonlit forests alongside a massive black wolf, feeling his joy in the hunt, his fierce protectiveness as we patrolled invisible boundaries. I woke at dawn with the phantom sensation of fur beneath my fingers and a hollow ache in my chest that I couldn't name. The morning brought a flurry of activity to my normally quiet cottage. First came Mrs. Peterson, eyes wide with gossip to share. "They found a man in the forest last night," she whispered, accepting the tea I offered with shaking hands. "Torn apart, they say, the marks of a massive beast upon him." She leaned closer, and Mayor Thornton claims 3 more bodies were discovered at the ridge, all strangers to the village, all armed with silver-tipped weapons. My hand stilled on my cup. "Silver-tipped?" She nodded gravely. "Wolf hunters. Old Thatcher says they've been sniffing around for weeks, asking questions about the packs, the boundaries. No one thought much of it until what? Until the Alpha King himself walked into the council hall this morning, bold as you please, with 4 of his guard." Her voice dropped further. "He demanded to know who had authorized the sale of your grandmother's land, Elara. Said it violated some ancient pact between our peoples." The pendant at my throat seemed to warm at her words. "What did the council say?" "They denied everything at first," she said with a grim smile, "until the Alpha produced documents. Actual parchment, yellow with age, showing your grandmother's bloodline has protected that boundary for generations. That the land was never the council's to give." Her eyes glittered with satisfaction. "You should have seen Thornton's face, child. White as new snow." I hardly had time to process this information before my next visitor arrived. Dr. Harrison, the village physician who had always regarded my herbal remedies with barely disguised contempt. "Miss Ellis," he said stiffly, standing uncomfortably in my doorway. "The council has asked me to, that is to say," he cleared his throat, "there are injured men at the town hall, survivors of the wolf attack. Their wounds are unusual. I find myself in need of your expertise." It took all my self-control not to show my shock. "My expertise, doctor? I thought my grandmother's remedies were, as you put it, superstitious nonsense." He had the grace to look abashed. "These are unusual circumstances. Will you come?" I gathered my supplies quickly, mind racing. What had Alaric done after leaving my garden? Had he truly killed the poacher who threatened me? And what of these ancient documents Mrs. Peterson mentioned? The village was buzzing with tension when we arrived, small clusters of people speaking in hushed tones that fell silent as I passed. Inside the town hall, Mayor Thornton paced before the great hearth, his normally florid face ashen. He barely acknowledged my presence as doctor. Harrison led me to a side room where 3 men lay on makeshift pallets. Their injuries were indeed unusual. Deep lacerations that should have been bleeding freely were instead blackened around the edges, as though burned. The men themselves were conscious but glassy-eyed, their skin clammy and gray. "Poison," I murmured, examining the wounds more closely. "But not one I recognize. Can you help them?" Dr. Harrison asked, professional dignity temporarily set aside in his concern. I hesitated. "I can try, but I need to understand what caused this first." "Wolf bites," one of the injured men rasped, his accent matching the poacher from my garden. "But not natural wolves, monsters, demons." "Silence," Mayor Thornton snapped, appearing in the doorway. "You'll speak of this to no one, do you understand? Miss Ellis is here to treat you. Nothing more." "What are they poisoned with?" I asked directly, holding the mayor's gaze until he looked away. "We don't know," Dr. Harrison admitted. "They were found near traps containing some substance. A paste smeared on the metal teeth. The Alpha's men believe it was meant for them." My blood ran cold. Not simple poachers then, but hunters with specific knowledge of how to harm werewolves. Hunters who had deliberately set poisoned traps on packlands, one of which had nearly killed the Alpha's nephew. "I need samples of the poison," I said, already mentally cataloging antidotes and access to my grandmother's old journals. "They're in a chest in my attic." Mayor Thornton shook his head. "There's no time for that. The Alpha is returning at midday with his royal guard. If these men die on our soil, then find someone to fetch my journals." I cut in, surprised at my own boldness. "Unless you'd prefer to explain 3 more deaths to the Alpha King." He glared but complied, dispatching a young boy to my cottage with specific instructions about the chest in my attic. I worked through the morning, applying poultices to draw out the poison and administering teas to combat the fever that gripped the men. When my grandmother's journals arrived, I pored over them frantically, searching for any mention of poison specific to werewolves. It was in the oldest journal, its pages brittle and its script faded, that I found what I needed. A detailed account of a similar poisoning nearly 80 years earlier, complete with formulations for an antidote. The ingredients were common enough: valerian root, wild garlic, mistletoe berries, and, surprisingly, the blood of a pack wolf freely given. I had everything but the last ingredient, and the sun was climbing toward midday. As if summoned by my thoughts, a commotion arose outside the town hall. Through the small window, I could see people scattering, making way for a procession unlike any I had ever witnessed. Alaric led them, once again in human form, dressed in regal black leather that emphasized the powerful lines of his body. Behind him walked 4 massive men, his guard, I presumed, each carrying themselves with the same predatory grace, and riding in Alaric's arms, his bandaged leg clearly visible, was Rurik in his pup form. My heart leapt at the sight of them both, a reaction so unexpected and powerful that I pressed a hand to my chest as if to contain it. Mayor Thornton hurried outside to meet them, his usual pompous demeanor replaced by obsequious bowing. Through the window, I watched as Alaric ignored him completely, his amber gaze scanning the assembled villagers until it found me. Even at this distance, the intensity of that look sent heat washing through me. With deliberate steps, he approached the town hall, the crowd parting before him like water. I moved to the door of the sick room, suddenly aware of my disheveled appearance, hair escaping its braid, sleeves rolled up, hands stained with herb juices. "Elara," he greeted me, his deep voice carrying easily across the now silent hall. Rurik yipped happily at the sight of me, squirming in Alaric's arms until he set the pup down carefully. Immediately, Rurik limped to my side, pressing against my skirts with obvious affection. "His wound is healing well," I observed, kneeling to check the bandage. "You've been applying the poultice, as instructed," Alaric replied, the hint of a smile warming his austere features. He insisted on accompanying me today, something about ensuring his rescuer was properly thanked. Behind him, one of the guards made a sound suspiciously like a suppressed laugh, quickly masked when Alaric glanced back. "I believe you were about to show me these trespassers," Alaric said, returning his attention to the mayor, who had been hovering anxiously nearby. "Yes, of course, Your Majesty," Thornton stammered, gesturing toward the sick room. "But I should warn you, their condition is precarious." Alaric's expression darkened as he took in the 3 poisoned men. "Wolf hunters," he growled, the sound so close to his wolf form that goosebumps rose on my arms. The same who set the trap that caught Rurik. They're dying, I said quietly, moving to stand beside him. Poisoned by their own weapon. I've found an antidote in my grandmother's journals, but it requires... I hesitated, uncertain how to make such a request. Requires what? Alaric prompted, his gaze intent. Blood of a pack wolf, freely given. I admitted. Without it, the antidote won't work. The guards behind Alaric growled low in their throats, clearly opposed to the very idea. Alaric himself went still, his amber eyes never leaving my face. You would save these men? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. Men who tried to kill Rurik, who would have killed you? I'm a healer, I replied simply. That's what I do. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, perhaps, or understanding. Without taking his eyes from mine, he extended his arm and pushed back his sleeve, exposing the corded muscle of his forearm. Will mine suffice? He asked softly. The blood of an alpha. The guards' growls grew louder in protest, but Alaric silenced them with a raised hand. More than suffice, I managed, stunned by his offer. But are you certain? They are your enemies, and you are not, he replied, the words heavy with meaning I couldn't fully grasp. Show me what you need, Elara Ellis, healer of the Boundary Lands. With trembling hands, I retrieved a small silver bowl from my supplies and a clean blade. Alaric watched calmly as I sterilized the blade in the flame of a candle, his expression betraying no fear or hesitation. This will sting, I warned unnecessarily, positioning the bowl beneath his extended arm. He actually smiled then, a flash of white teeth that transformed his severe features into something heartbreakingly handsome. I believe I can endure it. As the blade touched his skin, our eyes met and held. Something electric passed between us, a current of recognition that transcended the strangeness of our circumstances. I had known this man for less than a day, and yet some part of me felt as though I had been waiting for him my entire life. The blood that welled from the shallow cut was startlingly dark against his tanned skin. I caught it carefully in the silver bowl, my healer's instincts warring with a deeper, more primal awareness of the significance of what he had given me. Thank you, I whispered, bandaging his arm with the same care I had shown Rurik. Your grandmother would be proud, he replied quietly, the words meant for my ears alone, nurturing the balance, even when it costs you. The pendant at my throat warmed in response, as if acknowledging the truth of his words. The antidote took effect almost immediately. Color returned to the hunters' ashen faces, the blackened edges of their wounds fading to a more natural angry red. As I moved between them, applying fresh bandages and monitoring their vital signs, I was acutely aware of Alaric's presence. He stood by the door, a silent sentinel with Rurik at his feet, watching my every move with those unsettling amber eyes. Mayor Thornton hovered nearby, alternating between obsequious bows toward Alaric and nervous glances at the recovering hunters. Your Majesty, he ventured finally, now that these trespassers have been attended to, perhaps we might discuss the matter of the Boundary Lands? Alaric's gaze never left me. Bring the council elders to Miss Ellis's cottage at sunset, he commanded. We will resolve this matter where it began. My cottage? I echoed, straightening from my work. The boundary stone sits on your land, he replied, as if this explained everything. It is where such matters have always been decided. Before I could question him further, one of the hunters stirred, his eyes focusing on Alaric with hatred so visceral it made me step back. Abomination, he spat, his voice weak but venomous. Your kind were meant to be purged generations ago. Alaric regarded him with cold disdain. And yet, here we stand, while you lie helpless, owing your life to the very creatures you hunt, only because the witch interfered, the hunter snarled, his gaze shifting to me with equal contempt. Wolf sympathizer, blood traitor. In an instant, Alaric crossed the room, moving with that uncanny speed I had glimpsed in his wolf form. He seized the hunter by his throat, lifting him effortlessly from the pallet until his feet dangled above the floor. "Her name," Alaric growled, his voice rumbling with barely contained rage, "is Alara Ellis. She is under my protection. Speak of her with disrespect again, and your wounds will be the least of your concerns." The room had gone deathly still, even Thornton frozen in place by the display of primal dominance. I should have been terrified. Any sane person would be. Instead, I found myself moving to Alaric's side, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "He's not worth it," I said softly, "and I've spent too much time healing him to have you undo my work." Alaric's amber eyes met mine, the fury in them gradually receding. With a dismissive gesture, he released the hunter, who collapsed back onto the pallet, gasping. "You have until dawn to remove yourselves from these territories." Alaric addressed all 3 hunters, his voice cold and final. "If any of my patrols find you after first light, there will be no mercy." With that, he turned to me, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Are you ready to return home? There is much to prepare before the council arrives." The question contained layers of meaning that sent a flutter through my stomach, as if he had some claim to my cottage, as if it were the most natural thing in the world for him to escort me there. I nodded, suddenly eager to be away from the prying eyes and whispers of the village. Outside, the sunlight revealed what the dim interior of the town hall had hidden, a dark smear of dried blood at Alaric's temple, disappearing into his hairline. "You're injured," I exclaimed, reaching up without thinking to touch the wound. He caught my wrist before my fingers made contact, his grip gentle but unyielding. "It's nothing. A reminder to be more cautious when dealing with hunters who carry silver blades." The implication sent ice through my veins. "The man in my garden last night, you tracked him." "He threatened what's mine," Alaric replied simply, releasing my wrist. The words hung in the air between us, laden with meaning I wasn't sure I was ready to examine. The walk back to my cottage passed in charged silence, broken only by Rurik's occasional yips as he explored the path ahead of us, his limp already less pronounced. Villagers peered from windows and doorways as we passed, their expressions ranging from fear to fascination. "They fear you," I observed, as we left the village boundaries and entered the forest path that led to my home. "As they should," he replied without remorse. "Fear keeps the peace." "Is that what you want?" I asked, glancing at his profile. "Just peace?" Something like surprise flickered across his face. "What else would I want, Alara Ellis?" The way he said my name, as if tasting it, sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with fear. Understanding, perhaps. Recognition. The freedom to exist without hiding. He stopped walking, turning to face me fully. The dappled forest light played across his features, softening the hard angles of his face. "Those are human desires," he said quietly. "We are not human. Aren't you?" I challenged, emboldened by the privacy of the forest. "You walk on 2 legs when it suits you. You speak our language, enforce contracts, demand respect from our leaders." His lips curved in a smile that transformed his severe features. "Perceptive little healer," he murmured. "You see too much." "I see you," I replied simply, the words emerging before I could consider their weight. The smile faded from his face, replaced by an intensity that stole my breath. For a moment I thought he might reach for me, might close the careful distance he had maintained between us. Instead, he turned away, continuing down the path with measured strides. "Your grandmother," he said after several silent minutes. "She taught you well. Not just about herbs and healing, but about my kind." I thought of the stories she had told me, the lessons hidden in bedtime tales. She said there was a time when humans and wolves worked together, when healers served both communities. Alaric nodded, his expression distant, as if looking into the past. "The Ellis women have guarded the boundary for generations. Not just the physical land, but the boundary between our worlds. Keeping the balance. Maintaining the old ways when others would forget them." My hand rose instinctively to my grandmother's pendant. "She never told me that part. Perhaps she was waiting until you were ready," he suggested, his gaze dropping to the wolf pendant. Or until the right time came. We emerged from the forest path to find my cottage looking strangely different in the midday light. More vibrant somehow, as if awakening from a long slumber. In the garden where the poacher had trampled my herbs, fresh shoots had already broken through the soil, reaching for the sun with improbable vigor. "Life finds a way," Alaric murmured, following my gaze, "especially in boundary places, where magics meet and mingle." The casual mention of magic would have seemed absurd yesterday. Today, after all I had witnessed, it felt like simply another truth unveiling itself. Inside, the cottage was exactly as I had left it, yet it too seemed changed. As if Alaric's presence had somehow marked the space, claimed it in some ineffable way. He moved through my small home with the confidence of familiarity, Rurik trotting at his heels as if they had both been here 100 times before. "The council will arrive at sunset," he said, glancing out the window at the position of the sun. "We have a few hours to prepare. There are things you need to know, Elara, about your land, your bloodline, and what it means for both our peoples." "My bloodline?" I echoed, a chill running through me. "What about it?" Alaric's expression grew solemn. "Your grandmother was more than just a healer. She was a guardian, one of the last human bloodlines able to walk between worlds, to understand both human and wolf, to maintain the ancient accords that keep peace between us." The pendant seemed to pulse against my skin. "And now that role falls to me." It wasn't a question, but he nodded anyway. "If you choose to accept it, the choice must be yours, freely made. And if I refuse?" Something like pain flickered across his face. "Then the boundary weakens further. The hunters grow bolder. The balance shifts." He hesitated, choosing his next words carefully. "And what began between us ends before it has a chance to grow." My heart stumbled in my chest. "What began between us?" Alaric moved closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes. "You felt it the moment we met, Elara. The recognition. The pull." His voice deepened, roughened. "The way your heart races when I'm near. The way mine answers." I couldn't deny it. The inexplicable draw I felt toward him. The sense of rightness when he was near, but I wasn't ready to name it, to acknowledge what it might mean. "I barely know you," I whispered, though the words felt like a lie even as I spoke them. "Don't you?" He challenged softly. "Didn't you know me when you saved Rurik? When you stood your ground at your door? When you dreamed of running with me beneath the moon?" I gasped. "How did you know about my dreams?" The smile that curved his lips was both gentle and predatory, because I shared them, little healer. The bond was already forming, even then. Bond? The word felt heavy, significant. Before he could explain further, Rurik let out a warning yip from his position by the window. A moment later, I heard footsteps on the garden path, multiple sets, approaching with purpose. Alaric's expression hardened instantly, the vulnerability of the previous moment vanishing beneath his alpha mask. "They're early," he growled, moving to position himself between me and the door. A firm knock sounded, and without waiting for a response, Mayor Thornton pushed his way inside, followed by 4 members of the village council and, to my surprise, Dr. Harrison. "Miss Ellis," Thornton began, his tone falsely jovial, "forgive the intrusion, but we have urgent matters to discuss before the formal meeting this evening." His gaze darted nervously to Alaric, then back to me. "Matters that concern your position in the village, your special talents." "What matters?" I asked, instantly wary. Dr. Harrison stepped forward, his expression uncharacteristically deferential. "The hunters are recovering well, thanks to your intervention. The antidote you created, it's remarkable. Beyond anything in modern medicine, what the good doctor means," Thornton interjected, "is that your skills have proven more valuable than we previously acknowledged." He spread his hands in a placating gesture. "The council has reconsidered its position on your grandmother's land. We are prepared to withdraw our offer to the Pax and confirm your ownership, with certain conditions." Alaric's low growl vibrated through the small room, making the councilman step back. "You have no authority to offer what was never yours to give," he stated, his voice dangerously calm. The Ellis land has never been under village jurisdiction. Thornton licked his lips nervously. Nevertheless, we believe Miss Ellis might prefer human allies to other arrangements. The implication was clear, and it sent anger coursing through me. What conditions? I demanded. Simply that you share your grandmother's knowledge with Dr. Harrison, Thornton explained, his oily smile firmly in place. That you place your talents at the service of the village, exclusively. Exclusively, I repeated, understanding dawning. You want me to refuse my role as guardian? To break the bond with the Pax? Thornton's smile faltered, clearly surprised by my knowledge. The old ways are dying, Miss Ellis. The future lies with progress, with science, with your own kind. My own kind, I echoed, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. I looked around at the council members, at their closed faces and fearful eyes. Then at Alaric, proud and unyielding, yet who had offered his blood to save his enemies because I asked it of him. At Rurik, who had trusted me when he was at his most vulnerable. The pendant burned against my skin, and in that moment, I knew what my grandmother had always understood. The boundary wasn't just a line on a map. It was a place of possibility, of connection, of balance. My kind, I said slowly, meeting Thornton's gaze, has always stood at the boundary, Mayor, not on one side or the other. Alaric's amber eyes glowed with something like pride. Rurik yipped his approval from his place by the hearth. You can't seriously be considering an alliance with... Thornton began, but I cut him off. I'm not considering anything until sunset, I said firmly, when all parties can speak as equals. Now, I believe you were just leaving. The authority in my voice surprised even me. Thornton opened his mouth as if to protest, then closed it again, clearly recognizing a battle lost. With a stiff nod, he ushered the council members out, casting one last warning glance over his shoulder before closing the door. In the silence that followed their departure, Alaric's warm chuckle filled the cottage. You will make a formidable guardian, Alara Ellis, he said, eyes dancing with appreciation. If that is what you choose, the weight of the decision pressed on me, not just for myself, but for both communities, for the future of the boundary and all it represented. Tell me everything, I said, settling into my grandmother's chair by the hearth. About guardians, about the bond, about what it would mean. I met his gaze steadily. I need to understand before I choose. Alaric nodded, his expression solemn yet tender as he took the seat opposite mine. Rurik curled at my feet, his warm weight against my ankles oddly comforting. It begins, Alaric said softly, with the story of the first guardian, who saved a wolf prince much as you saved Rurik, and how that act of compassion changed both their worlds forever. As twilight painted my cottage windows in shades of amber and gold, Alaric finished the ancient tale. How the first guardian, a healer like me, had formed a bond with the wolf prince she rescued, creating a bridge between two worlds that had previously existed in fear and ignorance of each other. The bond isn't just symbolic, Alaric explained, his deep voice hypnotic in the gathering shadows. It's a true connection, of mind, of spirit, of purpose. Guardians can sense pack emotions, sometimes even thoughts. They heal faster, age slower, gain certain protections. And the wolves? I asked, absently stroking Rurik's fur as he dozed in my lap. What do they gain from this arrangement? Something vulnerable flickered in Alaric's amber eyes. Balance, perspective, a voice of compassion when instinct might lead to bloodshed. He hesitated, then added softly, and for the alpha who forms the primary bond, a partner who sees both the man and the wolf, who fears neither. The implication hung in the air between us, charged with possibilities I was only beginning to comprehend. The primary bond, I repeated. Between the guardian and the Alpha King, he finished, his gaze never leaving mine. The strongest wolf, linked with the strongest boundary keeper. Together they maintain the equilibrium between worlds. My throat felt suddenly dry. And if the guardian refuses, then she remains what she has always been, a gifted healer with an unusual affinity for wolves. His expression remained carefully neutral, though something like sadness darkened his eyes. The bond would fade over time. The boundary would hold for another generation or two, then slowly weaken. And you? The question escaped before I could stop it. A shadow of pain crossed his face. I would continue as Alpha King. Protect my people. Honor the old agreements as best I could. He looked away briefly, and remembered the healer, who might have been more. The raw honesty in his voice made my chest ache. I had known this man for barely a day. Yet the thought of walking away from whatever was growing between us felt like contemplating the loss of something precious and irreplaceable. Before I could respond, a howl rose from the forest. A signal. Alaric straightened, instantly alert. "The council approaches," he said, rising to his feet with fluid grace. "And my advisors with them." His expression grew serious. "Whatever you decide, Ilara, know that your land remains protected. I will ensure it, bond or no bond." The unexpected kindness in this promise touched me deeply. "Thank you," I whispered, gently shifting Rurik from my lap as I stood. Alaric moved to the door, then paused, turning back to face me. In the fading light, his powerful frame was outlined in gold, his features softened from their usual severity. "One last thing you should know," he said, his voice low and intimate. "The bond, once formed, is unbreakable, permanent." His gaze burned into mine. "In my world, we call it mating, one heart, one soul, for life." The word sent a shiver of recognition through me. Mating. Not marriage, with its human contracts and compromises, but something wilder, deeper, primal in its simplicity, and profound in its commitment. Before I could process this revelation, voices approached outside. Alaric opened the door, his demeanor shifting instantly to regal authority, as Mayor Thornton led the village council up the garden path. Behind them walked 4 imposing figures I recognized as Alaric's guards from earlier, accompanied by an elderly man whose silver hair and patrician features marked him as someone of importance. They assembled awkwardly in my small cottage, the human councilman clustering nervously by the door, Alaric's people gathering near the hearth where Rurik had resumed his nap. The division was symbolic, physical manifestation of the boundary I supposedly guarded. Alaric remained standing, his presence commanding the room. "We gather at the boundary stone," he began formally, "as our ancestors have done for generations. To renew old pacts, settle disputes, and maintain the balance." The elderly wolf stepped forward, producing an ancient scroll from within his robes. "The Covenant of the Boundary," he intoned, his voice surprisingly strong for his apparent age. "Signed in blood by Alpha King Thorn and Guardian Eliana Ellis in the year of the Great Divide." My breath caught at the name. Eliana, my grandmother's grandmother, whose portrait hung in the village hall. I had always thought the wolf pendant she wore in the painting was merely decorative. Mayor Thornton cleared his throat nervously. "While we respect these historical agreements," he began, his tone suggesting the opposite, "times have changed. Modern governance requires modern solutions." "The covenant is eternal," the elderly wolf countered, unrolling the scroll on my kitchen table. "The terms are clear. The boundary land, this land, remains under the protection of the Ellis bloodline, who serve as guardians between worlds. Neither human nor wolf council may claim it. And in return," Alaric continued, "the guardian maintains neutrality, offering healing and counsel to both communities. The Alpha King provides protection to the guardian and respects her autonomy." "Dr." Harrison leaned forward, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear. "This guardian role, what exactly does it entail? Miss Ellis has remarkable healing abilities, but surely this talk of boundaries and bonds is merely symbolic." A ripple of tension passed through Alaric's guards. The elderly wolf advisor fixed the doctor with a penetrating stare. "The guardian's gift is far more than herbcraft, human. She carries ancient magic in her bloodline. The ability to walk between worlds, to speak to both human reason and wolf instinct." My pendant warmed against my skin as if in confirmation of his words. All eyes turned to me, and I fought the urge to shrink from their scrutiny. "The real question," Mayor Thornton interjected, is whether Miss Ellis wishes to continue this primitive arrangement, or embrace a more progressive future with her own kind. The condescension in his voice sparked something fierce within me. Before Alaric could respond, I stepped forward, placing myself symbolically between the two groups. My grandmother once told me that wisdom lies in seeing both sides of any boundary, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. That true healing comes not from choosing one world over another, but from bridging the divide. I moved to the table, studying the ancient scroll with its elaborate script and faded bloodstains. My family's legacy, written in promises kept through generations. I've spent my life caught between worlds, I continued, emotions rising to the surface. Too strange for the village, too human for the forest, always apart, never belonging. I looked up, meeting Alaric's intense gaze. Perhaps that was preparation, not punishment. Perhaps I was always meant to stand at the boundary, not trapped by it, but guarding it. Something like hope flickered in Alaric's amber eyes. The elderly wolf nodded approvingly. The council makes grand offers to keep me firmly on the human side, I said, turning to Thornton. Land that was never theirs to give. Recognition they withheld until it served their purpose. Protection they never bothered to provide before. Thornton had the grace to look abashed, but his expression quickly hardened. You choose them then, these creatures, over your own people? I choose balance, I corrected him. I choose to honor my bloodline and the covenant they maintained. I choose to stand where I've always stood, at the edge, where healing is most needed. I moved deliberately to Alaric's side, feeling the rightness of the position deep in my bones. The boundary lands remain under my protection as guardian. I will continue to offer healing to all who seek it, human and wolf alike, and I will form the bond with Alpha King Alaric, as my ancestors did with his. The words emerged with a certainty that surprised me, as if they had been waiting inside me, needing only this moment to be spoken aloud. Alaric's hand found mine, his warm fingers intertwining with my own, in silent acknowledgement of the declaration. Mayor Thornton's face flushed with anger. This is outrageous. You can't possibly. The choice is made, the elderly wolf interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. The guardian has spoken. The covenant stands. Something shifted in the air of the cottage. A release of tension I hadn't realized was building. Outside, a chorus of howls rose from the forest, as if the pack was responding to an unheard signal. The human council will respect the boundary and the guardian's authority, Alaric stated, his tone making it clear this was not a request. In return, the packs will maintain the current territories and honor the hunting restrictions. Thornton looked as if he might protest further, but Dr. Harrison placed a restraining hand on his arm. We accept these terms, the doctor said, his gaze fixed on me with newfound respect, and hope this renewed covenant brings peace to both communities. The formalities concluded quickly after that, the ancient scroll resealed with both Alaric's mark and my signature. As the council members filed out, Dr. Harrison lingered. Your grandmother would be proud, he said quietly. She tried to tell me once about the old ways, the deeper healing. I was too blinded by science to listen. He hesitated, then added, Perhaps if you're willing, I might learn now. The olive branch surprised and touched me. My door is open to all who seek healing, Doctor, I replied with a small smile. That's what it means to stand at the boundary. When the last of the humans had departed, Alaric dismissed his guards and advisor as well, though Rurik remained curled by the hearth, watching us with knowing eyes. In the silence that followed, Alaric turned to me, the rigid formality of the Alpha King melting away to reveal something more vulnerable, more human. You chose the bond, he said softly, wonder in his voice, even knowing what it means. I looked up at him, at the face that had somehow become dear to me in the span of a single day. I chose you, I corrected gently. The bond, the duty, the responsibility, they're part of it. But at the heart, I chose you, Alaric. Something broke open in his expression, a tenderness so raw and powerful it took my breath away. Slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, he raised a hand to my cheek, his touch feather-light. From the moment I saw you standing in your doorway, defiant and beautiful, protecting what was mine, he murmured. Something in me recognized you, not just as guardian, but as mate, as equal. His thumb traced the curve of my cheekbone. As home. The word resonated through me, striking a chord of truth I couldn't deny. Home. Not the cottage, not the village, not even the boundary lands, but this connection, this belonging, this man who saw all of me and found me worthy. How do we form the bond? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, his lips curved in a smile that transformed his severe features, making him achingly handsome. It begins with this, he said. And slowly, deliberately, he lowered his mouth to mine. The kiss was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand, but as I responded, twining my arms around his neck and pressing closer, it deepened into something primal and necessary. Heat flared between us, a recognition that went beyond the physical, reaching into soul-deep places I hadn't known existed. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his amber eyes had darkened to molten gold, pupils dilated with desire, and something more profound. The true bond forms under the full moon, he explained, his voice rough with emotion. 3 nights from now, there's a ritual, ancient words. He pressed his forehead to mine, but this, what's between us now, is the beginning, the recognition, the choice. And until then? I asked, not ready to release him, to break the connection that hummed between us. His smile turned tender, a hint of the wolf's predatory gleam in its edges. Until then, I court you properly, little healer. I bring you gifts worthy of a guardian. I show you the territories you'll help protect. He brushed a strand of hair from my face. I learn every expression that crosses this face, every sound you make when pleased or annoyed. The intimacy of his words sent heat flooding through me. And where will you stay? Your pack? Can manage without me hovering for a few days? He finished, amusement warming his tone, though I suspect we'll have company. He nodded toward Rurik, who was watching us with what could only be described as smug satisfaction. The pup seems to have decided your cottage is his second home. As if in agreement, Rurik yipped softly, his tail thumping against the floor. I did save him, I reminded Alaric, unable to suppress my smile. According to your stories, that creates its own bond. Indeed it does, Alaric agreed, his expression sobering. You saved more than Rurik that night, Alara. You may have saved us all, humans and wolves alike. The hunters were just the beginning, without a guardian to maintain the boundary. He shook his head. The old hatreds would have risen again. The bloodshed would have returned. The weight of responsibility should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a strange peace settling over me, as if pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known I was solving were finally falling into place. Then it's fortunate I was stubborn enough to wander the forest on the night of the hunt, I said, reaching up to trace the strong line of his jaw. Fortunate that a wolf pup caught in a trap crossed my path. Alaric caught my hand, pressing a kiss to my palm that sent shivers racing up my arm. Not fortune, he murmured against my skin. Fate. The same fate that has drawn Guardian to Alpha for generations. Outside, the moon rose above the forest. Not yet full, but growing, its silver light spilling through my windows and across the floor where we stood entwined. In 3 nights it would witness our formal bonding, the ancient magic awakening fully in my blood, the connection between us made permanent and unbreakable. But in truth, the choice had been made the moment I knelt beside an injured pup and offered healing instead of fear. The boundary between our worlds had already begun to dissolve, not into chaos, but into something new and stronger. A bridge built of compassion, respect, and this fierce, unexpected love. Alaric drew me closer, his powerful arms encircling me with a gentleness that belied his strength. My guardian, he whispered against my hair. I pressed my cheek to his chest, listening to the strong, steady rhythm of his heart. My Alpha, I answered, the words feeling ancient and true on my tongue. Rurik yipped his approval, and beyond the cottage walls, the pack howled in celebration, their voices rising to greet the waxing moon. Not with hunger or menace, but with joy. welcoming their alpha's mate, their new guardian, the healer who had saved a pup from the hunt and found her heart claimed by the Alpha King in return.